The sound of knees dragging across sacred marble is a noise you never forget. It is distinct, wet, and heavy. It scrapes against the silence of the room like a knife against bone. The date is October 30th, 1501. The place is the Apostolic Palace, the beating heart of the Catholic Church, the home of God's representative on earth. But tonight, God is not here. You are sitting in the private apartments of the Pope, surrounded by the most powerful men in Christendom. Your wine cup trembles in your hand, the red liquid rippling with the tremors of your own fear, but you do not dare set it down. To set it down would be to draw attention to yourself. And tonight, attention is a death sentence. Around you, cardinals in scarlet robes stare fixedly at the floor. Some are mumbling prayers, their lips moving in frantic, silent, desperate pleas for forgiveness. Others have closed their eyes, entirely unable to reconcile the sanctity of their office with the reality before them. And between their legs, crawling like animals across the intricate mosaics of the Vatican floor, 50 naked women are scrambling for chestnuts. They are on their hands and knees, their skin gleaming with sweat in the candlelight, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they compete for the amusement of the Vicar of Christ. Pope Alexander VI sits on his throne, his corpulent frame shaking with laughter. He points, he cheers, he throws more nuts into the fray, treating human beings like pigeons in a piazza. But here's what freezes your blood colder than the marble floor. This grotesque display, this banquet of chestnuts, is just the appetizer. It is merely the entertainment to warm up the crowd. The bride sitting stone, faced at the high table, does not know yet what her father has planned for her before the sun rises. He has orchestrated a finale so calculated, so surgically cruel, that it won't just violate her body. It will dismantle her soul piece by piece while the most holy men in Europe watch and do nothing. Stay with me, because what you are about to discover has been buried in secret diaries and forbidden archives for 500 years. This is the story of Lucrezia Borgia and the night that should have damned the Vatican forever. To understand the horror of that night, we must rewind 3 weeks to early December 1501. A man rides through the Flaminian Gate of Rome, but he does not look like a prince coming to claim his bride. He looks like a condemned prisoner walking the final steps to the scaffold. His name is Alfonso d'Este, the heir to the Duchy of Ferrara. He is 25 years old, scion of one of the oldest, proudest families in Italy. He is a man of war, a man of cannons and steel. But as he looks up at the towering walls of the Castel Sant'Angelo, he is terrified. He is riding into the maw of the beast to marry a woman whose name is whispered in every court in Europe as a curse. Lucrezia Borgia, the Pope's daughter. A woman whose last 2 husbands are dead and not by accident. Her first husband, Giovanni Sforza, was declared impotent in a humiliating public trial, stripped of his dignity and discarded like refuse when he was no longer politically useful. Her second husband, Alfonso of Aragon, the man she actually loved, was stabbed on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica. When he didn't die fast enough, when he survived the assassin's blades, her brother Cesare Borgia sent his personal executioner Michelato to strangle him in his recovery bed. Lucrezia had stood outside the door, screaming, pounding on the wood until her hands bled listening to the man she loved gasp his last breath. That was 18 months ago. Now, it is Alfonso d'Este's turn. Alfonso had tried everything to escape this marriage. He made excuses. He feigned illness. His father, Duke Ercole, had begged the Pope to choose someone else, anyone else. But the response from Rome was simple and chilling: accept the alliance or watch Caesare's armies reduce Ferrara to ash. The Borgias didn't negotiate, they commanded. So, here he is. The reception is designed to break him psychologically before the wedding even begins. Pope Alexander VI receives him in the Sala Regia. The Pope is 69 years old, a towering figure of flesh and charisma, radiating power like heat from a furnace. His eyes scan Alfonso the way a butcher examines a side of beef, calculating its worth. To his right stands Cesare Borgia, 26 years old, the cardinal who threw away his robes to become a general. He is the man who ordered the death of Lucrezia's last husband. He doesn't speak. He just watches, a faint, mocking smile playing on his lips, the look of a predator who has already tasted blood and is hungry for more. For 3 weeks, Alfonso is subjected to a gauntlet of humiliations disguised as celebrations. He is dragged to banquets where he is seated next to notorious courtesans, while cardinals smirk behind their hands. He is forced to attend hunting parties, where Cesare demonstrates his lethal marksmanship, shooting wild boars with a precision that serves as a silent threat: I can kill anything I want, whenever I want. He endures receptions where the Pope makes lewd jokes about his dead predecessors, laughing at the mortality of the men Alfonso replaced. Every night Alfonso returns to his chambers and writes letters to his father. He writes in code, terrified that the Borgia spies are reading his words. He wonders if the wine at dinner was poisoned. He wonders if the shadows in his room are assassins. He wonders which day will be his last. Then comes the wedding day. The papal chapel is a masterpiece of intimidation. Golden walls reflect the light of thousands of beeswax candles. Frescoes of saints and angels look down in judgment on the assembly. The air is thick with incense, a cloying sweetness that coats the throat and masks the scent of fear. Pope Alexander officiates personally. His booming voice echoes through the chamber as he speaks the sacred Latin words that will bind his daughter to her third victim. Alfonso stands at the altar, his hands trembling so violently he has to clasp them together to hide the shaking. He can feel Cesare's eyes boring into the back of his neck, cold and patient. And beside him stands Lucrezia. She is 21 years old. Her famous golden hair is arranged in elaborate braids, threaded with pearls the size of grapes. She wears a gown of gold brocade and crimson silk worth more than the entire tax revenue of a small city. She is breathtaking. She is the most beautiful woman in Rome. But if you look at her eyes, really look at them, you see the truth. They are empty, not sad, not angry, not frightened, just vacant. It is the look of someone who left their body a long time ago and never bothered to return. She stands there like a doll, a beautiful, expensive prop in her father's play. The night before, while her handmaidens prepared her trousseau, Lucrezia had stood at her window, looking out at the city that had devoured her life. Rome, the city where she was born. The city where she had played in the Vatican gardens as a child, innocent of the monster her family would become. The city where she had washed the blood of her husband off her hands. One of her ladies, a young girl from Naples who didn't know better, had asked, "Are you excited for the wedding?" My lady Lucrezia had turned slowly. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that sends a shiver down the spine, a mechanical stretching of lips over teeth. Excited, she repeated, tasting the word as if it were poison. Yes. Of course. She didn't sleep that night. She spent the hours of darkness in the chapel of Santa Maria in Portico, kneeling on the cold stone floor until her knees were bruised. She prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening. He hadn't answered when they annulled her first marriage and branded her a whore. He hadn't answered when her brother murdered her love. But she prayed anyway because prayer was the only act of rebellion left to her. It was the only thing they couldn't take away. Now standing at the altar, she speaks her vows in a voice so flat it barely registers as human. Alfonso responds in kind, his voice tight with dread. They are two ghosts performing a ritual for an audience of wolves. The rings are exchanged. The Pope pronounces them man and wife. And then Alexander smiles that wide, terrifying, predatory smile that charmed kings and terrified nations. He raises his hands and announces that the religious boring part is over. Now, he says, the true celebration can begin. The guests are herded out of the chapel and led to the Borgia apartments for the wedding feast. The heavy doors close behind them with a finality that sounds like a prison cell slamming shut. Swiss guards take positions at every exit, their halberds crossing to bar the way. Lucrezia feels a chill settle in her bones. She knows that smile. She knows that look in her father's eyes. He is about to teach her a new lesson. And whatever it is, she will have to survive it. The only way she knows how, by disappearing inside herself. The feast begins with an extravagance that borders on obscenity. Servants bring out platters of roasted peacock, their feathers reattached and gilded with gold leaf. Mountains of exotic fruits from the New World. Wine that flows like water, deep red and intoxicating. Musicians play lively tunes. Poets recite verses praising the beauty of the bride and the valor of the groom. Laughter echoes off the painted walls, bouncing between the frescoes of pagan gods. Hours pass. The wine does its work. The conversation grows louder, looser. Some of the guests begin to relax, lulled into a false sense of security by the luxury. Alfonso almost lets himself believe that the worst is over, that this is just a wedding, however extravagant. Then he notices the change. The guards have multiplied. They have moved closer to the tables. He notices that Caesar Borgia hasn't touched his wine all night. His goblet sits full untouched while his eyes dart around the room, cataloging every weakness. He notices the Pope staring at him not with the warmth of a father-in-law, but with the expectant gaze of a man waiting for the curtain to rise on a bloody play. Midnight approaches. The witching hour. Caesare stands up. The room falls silent instantly. It is as if someone cut the strings of every voice at once. He walks to the side doors and gives a quiet order. The doors swing open. 50 women enter the hall. They are dressed in magnificent gowns of velvet and silk adorned with jewels that catch the candlelight and fracture it into 1,000 rainbows. These aren't common streetwalkers. These are Rome's elite courtesans, the honest courtesans women who serve cardinals, ambassadors, and princes. They are educated, refined, and beautiful, but their eyes give them away. They are wide with terror. They dart toward the exit, seeing the Swiss guards blocking the way. Pope Alexander rises from his throne, his face flushed with wine and anticipation. Now, he bellows, the true entertainment begins. At his command, the women begin to undress. It is not seductive. It is mechanical and fearful. One by one, heavy gowns fall to the marble floor. Silk puddles around bare feet. Corsets are unlaced. Chemises are dropped. Within moments, 50 women stand completely naked before the assembled princes of the church. The silence in the room is heavy, thick with shock. Some cardinals look away, their faces burning. Others clutch their rosaries, lips moving in prayers that feel obscene in this context. A few younger clergy lean forward, drunk enough to forget their vows. Alfonso stares at his plate, his knuckles white around his knife, wishing he could vanish. But Alexander isn't finished. Servants enter carrying heavy wicker baskets filled with chestnuts. They move among the women, scattering the nuts across the floor. Hundreds of them rolling between the feet of horrified guests, disappearing under tables, clicking against the sacred marble like hail. Then the Pope announces the rules of his game. The women must crawl on all fours and collect the chestnuts with their mouths and hands. Whoever gathers the most wins prizes from the papal treasury: silk tunics, golden necklaces, velvet shoes. The scene that follows is a descent into madness. 50 naked women drop to their hands and knees. They crawl between the legs of cardinals and bishops. They scramble beneath frescoes of the Virgin Mary. The sound is unforgettable. The soft thud of knees on stone, the clink of chestnuts, the stifled sobs of women being stripped of their dignity, and above it all, laughter. The Pope is laughing. Caesare is laughing. It is a sound that bounces off the golden walls like something from hell's own banquet. Some guests, caught up in the madness or fearful of not joining in, start throwing chestnuts, further making the women crawl longer distances. An elderly cardinal tries to stand and leave his face a mask of disgust. A guard places a hand on his shoulder and forces him back down. No one leaves. And Lucrezia, she sits motionless beside Alfonso. Her face is a porcelain mask. She sees the naked women, she hears the laughter, she smells the sweat and the wine, but she is not there. She has retreated into the fortress of her mind. She has learned that when her family performs their atrocities, the only way to survive is to become a statue. The banquet continues for hours, until the courtesans are huddled in corners, clutching their humiliating prizes, shivering and unable to look anyone in the eye. Alfonso thinks it is finally over. He thinks he has survived the worst the Borgias can throw at him. He is wrong. The Pope rises again. The laughter dies down. His face is serious now, filled with a terrible purpose. The sacred duty of marriage, Alexander announces, his voice booming, must now be fulfilled. In any normal, noble wedding, consummation happens privately. Perhaps witnesses verify the bedsheets the next morning, uncomfortable, yes, but standard. What Alexander orders is a violation of every norm of decency. Alfonso and Lucrezia will consummate their marriage tonight. Not once. 3 times. And every person in this room, the cardinals, the ambassadors, the courtesans, the guards, will serve as witnesses. The hall goes silent. Not quiet silent. It is the complete vacuum of sound that happens when 100 people stop breathing at the same time. Even Caesare shows a flicker of surprise. Even he didn't expect his father to go this far. Alfonso stands up. His face has gone the color of old bone. He is a prince of the blood. He has spent his entire life training in dignity, honor, and the codes of chivalry. And he has just been ordered to perform the most intimate act of his life as public theater, as a biological performance for a room full of drunks. He looks at the guards. He looks at Caesare, whose hand rests casually on the hilt of his sword. He looks at the Pope, whose smile hasn't wavered. There is no escape. To refuse is to die. To refuse is to declare war. They are led to an adjoining chamber, a room normally used for receiving ambassadors, now hastily furnished with a bed draped in crimson silk. The doors remain wide open. Guests are positioned in the outer hall with direct sightlines into the room. What happens over the next several hours strips away every remaining layer of human dignity until nothing is left but flesh and shame. Alfonso, psychologically shattered, surrounded by armed men and watching eyes, consummates the marriage. His movements are mechanical, desperate. His mind has retreated somewhere far away, perhaps to the hunting fields of Ferrara. Lucrezia lies beneath him, eyes fixed on the painted ceiling, silent and still as a corpse. She knows how to separate her soul from her body. She knows how to become an empty vessel until the storm passes. But here's the part that breaks you. Afterward, Caesare personally enters the chamber. He inspects the evidence with clinical detachment, like a doctor examining a patient. Then he walks out and announces loudly enough for everyone to hear that the first consummation has occurred, and he orders them to wait 1 hour, and then repeat it. 1 hour. Imagine that hour. Alfonso sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, unable to look at his wife. Lucrezia lying motionless, staring at nothing. The murmur of voices in the outer hall discussing their performance. Servants refreshing wine for guests who are not allowed to leave. and the knowledge that in 60 minutes the nightmare begins again. The second consummation happens around 2 a.m. Both of them are operating in states of complete dissociation now. Bodies moving without minds attached. Humanity switched off because the alternative is screaming madness. In the outer room, cardinals murmur prayers that taste like ash in their mouths. Courtesans who were humiliated hours earlier weep silently for Lucrezia recognizing a sister in suffering. Even the Swiss guards shift uncomfortably, averting their eyes. But no one intervenes. No one speaks. No one does anything because the Pope commands it, and the Pope speaks for God. Then comes dawn. The first gray light touches the windows of the Borgia apartments. Alexander orders the third and final act. When it is complete, Caesar announces triumphantly that the marriage is now sealed 3 times over. It is absolutely irrevocable under church and secular law. No annulment is possible. No escape clause exists. No way out. The Pope raises his wine cup for a final toast to the happy couple. Alfonso sits at the edge of the bed, his entire body trembling uncontrollably. He will return to Ferrara a broken man. He will never speak of this night to anyone, not to his family, not to his children, not to his confessor. He will bury it deep inside him until it rots. And Lucrezia, she lies still in her torn wedding gown, eyes open, seeing nothing. Her soul has retreated so far inside that it may never fully return. They wanted to destroy her while she kept breathing. They succeeded. But here is the twist. Lucrezia outlived them all. Her father died 2 years later, bloated and rotting, possibly poisoned by his own wine. Cesare died in a ditch in Spain, stripped naked by looters. The machine they built consumed them both. But Lucrezia survived. She went to Ferrara. She became La Buona Duchessa. She raised children who never knew about that night. She won. But she never forgot. Her ladies reported that she woke screaming from nightmares for the rest of her life. That sometimes in the middle of a conversation her eyes would go distant and dark. That she spent hours kneeling on cold chapel stones praying to a God who never answered. The lesson of that night echoes across centuries. Power can take everything from you. It can take your body, your dignity, your hope. But it cannot take the part of you that chooses to survive. Lucrezia held on to that part until her final breath. I am still here, she seemed to say. And 500 years later, so is her story. If you heard this voice from the past, subscribe. We dig up the truths they tried to bury. Because the past isn't dead. It's just waiting for us to listen.